Welcome to the channel. Hit subscribe and dive into stories that'll stay with you long after the video ends. Let's begin. It started with the sound of glass breaking, a sharp crack that sliced through the still air of the grocery aisle like lightning through a quiet night. Ethan turned instinctively, his hand still gripping a carton of milk, eyes narrowing toward the noise. A woman, young, pale, and visibly trembling, was standing near the self-checkout station. A jar of olives had rolled from her basket and shattered across the tiles, green shards glistening in a pool of oil. But it wasn't the broken jar that caught his attention. It was the way she froze, staring not at the mess but at the exit, like someone deciding whether to run. He saw the bulge of something hidden under her worn sweater, a shape that didn't belong. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, shoplifters, desperate ones. He worked part-time at this small-town grocery store. Not much pay, but enough to get by. And in a place like Willow Creek, theft wasn't rare. People struggling to make ends meet often found themselves one bad day away from trouble. Still, there was a policy, report it, no exceptions. When he stepped closer, the woman flinched. "Hey," he said softly, raising his hands, "you all right there?" Her eyes darted from him to the door again, wide, glassy, and full of fear. "Please," she whispered. I'll clean it up. Just let me go." Ethan's gaze dropped to the edge of her sweater where the fabric pressed awkwardly against her ribs. He could make out the corner of a box, something she hadn't paid for. He exhaled, steady but firm. "I think you've got something that doesn't belong to you." Her breath hitched, tears pooled in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, shaking. "I didn't mean to, please, I just need—" "Ma'am, stop," Ethan interrupted, though his voice softened. "I'm not here to make a scene. Just hand it over and we'll sort it out, okay?" Behind him, an older customer muttered something about these types and walked off shaking his head. Ethan ignored it. The woman hesitated, then slowly reached into her sweater. Her hands trembled so violently that for a second he thought she might collapse. When she pulled out the box, it was a small package of medicine, children's cold syrup. Ethan's stomach dropped a little. Not jewelry, not cigarettes. Medicine. He frowned. She placed it on the counter like it was something sacred. "I wasn't stealing," she said under her breath. "I just couldn't afford it. My daughter, she's sick. I swear I was going to come back and pay." The sincerity in her voice made him pause, but training and rules echoed in his mind. He was supposed to call the manager, maybe even the police if she tried to flee. He reached for the store phone behind the counter. Her expression changed instantly from fear to panic. "Please," she whispered, stepping back. "Don't call them. Please, he'll find out." Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the phone. "He'll find out," he repeated. "Who's he?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her sleeve slipped slightly down her wrist, and that's when he saw it. Dark bruises, yellow and purple, circling her arm like shackles. He felt a jolt of confusion and guilt all at once. The kind that doesn't let you breathe for a moment. And for the first time, Ethan realized maybe she wasn't running because she'd stolen something. Maybe she was running from someone. The store suddenly felt smaller. The humming of the fluorescent lights grew louder, almost oppressive, as Ethan tried to process what he'd just seen. The bruises weren't faint or accidental. They were deliberate, patterned. The kind that came from fingers wrapped too tightly around skin. He took a slow breath, lowering his hand from the phone. "Who did that to you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her sleeve back down with trembling fingers and looked toward the door again. "I can't stay," she murmured. "He's looking for me." Ethan's pulse quickened. There was something in the way she said it, flat, certain, resigned, like she'd already accepted whatever would happen next. "Who's looking for you?" he asked again, gentler this time. She shook her head, eyes darting to the parking lot beyond the glass doors. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If he finds me here, it'll be worse. Please, just let me go." Ethan hesitated. His mind raced between the rules he'd been trained to follow and the raw panic he saw in her eyes. If he let her leave with stolen goods, he could lose his job, but if he didn't, he wasn't sure what he'd be sending her back to. He looked down at the syrup box still sitting on the counter. The label showed a cartoon child smiling under a blue sky. The contrast made his chest ache. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She blinked, startled by the question. "Lena," she said after a pause. "Lena Brooks." "Okay, Lena," he said, lowering his voice. "No one's calling the cops, not yet. Just tell me what's going on. Maybe I can help." Her lips trembled, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then in a voice barely louder than a breath, she replied, "He's my husband, and he doesn't like when I leave the house." Ethan felt his throat tighten. There was a clarity to her words, a cold truth that didn't need embellishment. "He hits you?" She looked down, silence, that was answer enough. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. He'd never been in a situation like this. He was just a part-time clerk, for God's sake. But standing there, watching her tremble, he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen the bruises. Outside, the automatic door slid open. The sound made Lena flinch. A man in a dark jacket walked in, his eyes sweeping the aisles like a searchlight. Lena's entire body stiffened. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the counter. "Is that him?" Ethan whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The terror in her eyes said everything. The man's gaze locked onto her almost immediately. He smiled, a thin, chilling curve of his lips, and started walking toward them. Ethan's instincts screamed to move, to do something, but his feet stayed rooted to the floor. The man's footsteps echoed on the tile, deliberate, heavy, each one closer than the last. When he reached them, he slipped an arm around Lena's shoulder like a practiced gesture. "There you are," he said smoothly. "Been looking all over for you." Lena's face went blank. The light in her eyes seemed to disappear. Ethan forced his voice to stay steady. "Sir, she dropped something earlier, that's all. Everything's fine." The man's stare shifted to him, cold and assessing, a predator's look. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then, still smiling, the man said, "Appreciate you watching out for her." But there was something in his tone that made Ethan's stomach twist, something that said this wasn't over. And when they turned to leave, Lena glanced back once, her eyes silently pleading for help. Ethan watched them step through the automatic doors and into the fading light outside. Lena walked like someone moving through fog, head down, shoulders tight, every step small and cautious. The man's hand stayed pressed against the small of her back, guiding her, owning her. Ethan couldn't shake the image of those bruises. They pulsed in his mind like a warning light. He knew she didn't want him to call anyone, but if he did nothing, what then? The sliding doors whispered shut, sealing the silence behind them. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the store. He could still smell the sharp tang of broken olives. The normal hum of shoppers had resumed, but everything felt wrong. He stepped outside, his breath fogging in the cool air. The parking lot stretched out under a dull gray sky. He saw them about 30 yards away, Lena climbing into a rusted blue pickup, the man opening the driver's side door. Something in her movement stopped him cold. When she looked up, just for a second, their eyes met. It wasn't a look of recognition. It was a plea. A silent, desperate message he could feel in his bones. "Help me." Before Ethan could move, the man slammed the truck door and started the engine. The roar drowned out everything else. The vehicle jerked backward, then sped out of the lot, disappearing down the road. Ethan stood there, heart pounding, hands clenched at his sides. He didn't know what to do. Should he call the police? Tell them what? That a woman he didn't know had stolen cold medicine and looked scared. That she had bruises and a husband with a smile that felt like a threat. It wasn't enough. They'd ask for proof. They'd tell him to stay out of it. And maybe she'd pay the price for his interference. He felt sick. Back inside, the manager, Carl, a heavyset man in his 50s, was standing near the counter. "What was that about?" Carl asked, frowning. "That lady steal something?" Ethan hesitated. "No, just misunderstanding. She dropped it." Carl grunted. "All right, clean up that mess on aisle 3 when you can, and don't let customers cause a scene. Makes the others nervous." "Yeah," Ethan muttered. "Sure." He cleaned up the broken glass, each crunch under his rag a reminder of how useless he'd just been. But as he wiped the oil from the tiles, something glinted under the shelf. A small piece of paper, folded twice. He picked it up. Inside, in messy handwriting, were just 4 words: "Please find us tonight." His breath caught. The note smelled faintly of her perfume, faint, floral, familiar. It hadn't been there before. She must have dropped it on purpose. Ethan read the note again. "Find us." Where? He turned it over and saw an address scrawled in the corner: Old Mill Road, Cabin 3. He knew that place. Everyone in Willow Creek did. The cabin sat by the river, mostly empty now, leftovers from an abandoned fishing resort decades ago. No one went there anymore. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his neck. If she was asking him to come, it meant she had no one else, and maybe no more time. He glanced toward the front door, then at the fading light outside. His shift wasn't over, but his mind was already made up. Whatever waited on Old Mill Road, he was going. The road to Old Mill was a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt, winding through miles of pine and fog. By the time Ethan turned off the main highway, the sun had fallen completely. The only light came from his truck's headlights cutting through the mist, painting the trees in pale streaks of gold and gray. He kept glancing at the note on the passenger seat, reading the words again and again. "Please find us. Tonight." The message pulsed in his chest like a heartbeat. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. As he neared the turnoff, sound of gravel crackled beneath his tires. Old Mill Road was darker than he remembered. Cabin 3 sat at the far end, half-collapsed roof, a flickering porch light that buzzed weakly against the night. He parked a few yards away, killed the engine, and listened. Crickets, wind through the trees, and beneath it all something else, a faint, rhythmic thumping. He stepped out, heart hammering, gravel crunching under his boots. The cold air bit at his face. "Lena," he called softly. No answer, just the creak of the old porch as he stepped up onto it. The door was cracked open. A thin beam of yellow light spilled from inside, landing across the porch like a warning. He pushed gently. The hinges groaned. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and fear. Empty beer cans on the table. A child's toy, a small stuffed rabbit, lying on the floor beside a tip-over chair. "Lena," he whispered again. "It's Ethan, from the store." From the back room, a soft sound, a whimper. Muffled and fragile, he followed it. The narrow hallway was lined with peeling wallpaper and shadow. Each step felt like walking deeper into a secret he wasn't meant to see. When he reached the last door, he hesitated. The whimper came again, clearer this time. A child, crying. He turned the handle slowly and pushed it open. Lena was there, crouched on the floor, her daughter pressed against her chest. The girl couldn't have been more than 6, thin, pale, with fever-bright eyes. Lena looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Aim," she whispered. "Thank God." Ethan stepped inside quickly and shut the door behind him. "What happened? Is he here?" She shook her head, clutching her child tighter. "He went to get more beer. I don't have long." Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I tried to leave last week. He took my phone, my money, everything. He said if I ever tried again, he'd hurt her instead of me." Ethan felt something twist deep inside him. Rage, pity, disbelief, all tangled together. "Lena, we have to go now, before he comes back." She hesitated. "If he finds out." "Then we make sure he doesn't," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "You've got me now." She stared at him for a moment, searching for doubt, and found none. Then she nodded. Her little girl coughed weakly, the sound sharp and hollow. Ethan looked around, grabbed a blanket from the floor, and wrapped it around the child. He could feel her heat through the fabric. "Fever. We're going to the hospital first," he said. "Then the police." But before Lena could answer, a car engine roared outside. Headlights swept across the cracked window, flooding the room in white light. Lena's eyes widened. "He's back," she whispered. Ethan turned toward the door, the engine cut off. A car door slammed, and then from outside, a voice, low, calm, and unmistakably cruel, called out, "Lena, you in there?" The voice outside was smooth, almost casual, but beneath it, Ethan could hear the threat, every word heavy with possession. "Lena," the man called again, his footsteps crunching closer on the gravel. "I know you're in there. You think I'm stupid." Lena clutched her daughter tighter. Her whisper was frantic. "He'll kill us if he sees you here." Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He glanced around the room, an old dresser, a cracked window, a back door hanging slightly off its hinges. They didn't have time to plan. They only had one chance. "Take her," Lena said suddenly, pressing the little girl into his arms. "Go out the back, please. He won't hurt me if she's gone." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving you here." The doorknob rattled, the man's tone hardened. "Lena, open this damn door before I break it down." Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. He set the child behind the dresser and turned to Lena. "You trust me?" She nodded once. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Then do exactly what I say." The first crash hit the door like thunder. The frame splintered. Ethan grabbed a broken chair leg from the floor and moved to the side of the entrance. The second hit sent the door swinging wide, and the man stumbled inside. He was taller than Ethan remembered, broad-shouldered, reeking of alcohol. His eyes, dark and wild, locked on Lena first. "What did I tell you, huh?" he snarled, stepping toward her. "I said you don't leave." Before he could take another step, Ethan swung. The chair leg cracked against the man's arm. He roared, spinning toward him in shock. "Who the hell?" Ethan didn't let him finish. He swung again, aiming low. The man staggered, caught himself on the wall, and came back with a furious swing of his own. Ethan ducked, the blow glancing off his shoulder. Pain shot down his arm, but he stayed standing. Behind them, Lena grabbed her daughter and darted toward the back door. "Go!" Ethan shouted. "Run!" The man lunged to grab her, but Ethan slammed into him with everything he had. They crashed against the table, sending bottles rolling to the floor. The fight was messy, desperate, primal. Ethan wasn't stronger, but he was fighting for something the other man couldn't understand: freedom, safety, a promise. He caught the man's wrist, twisted, and shoved him backward into the wall. The man's head hit the plaster with a sickening thud. He slid down, groaning, eyes glassy. Ethan staggered, gasping, his arm throbbing. He looked toward the door. Lena was gone. The night outside was silent again. For a long moment he just stood there, catching his breath, heart pounding so loud it drowned the world. Then he turned and ran, down the path, through the trees, toward the faint beam of headlights up ahead. Lena was standing beside his truck, her daughter in her arms. Her face streaked with tears, but her eyes this time held something different: hope. Ethan reached them, hands shaking. "You okay?" Lena nodded. "You saved us." He looked back toward the cabin, where the faint sound of sirens was beginning to rise in the distance. A neighbor must have heard the noise. Help was finally coming. Lena looked at her daughter, then back at him. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," she whispered. "No one ever does." Ethan swallowed hard. "You don't have to run anymore." The sirens grew louder, red and blue light painting the trees. Lena held her daughter close, eyes closing as if letting go of years of fear. Ethan stood beside them, the cool night wind brushing against his face. Somewhere behind him, the darkness still waited, but it no longer felt as heavy. For the first time that night, he breathed without guilt, because sometimes a thief isn't running from the law. They're running for their life. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and visit the channel for more real-life emotional stories.